Now, Harvard is a very, very good school, but I didn't like it because it was too good. Too good is not good. I was trying to find why it's such a good school, but there's a reason, okay, because I was inside. At that time, I was shocked because I had no idea. And I was like, okay, why am I here? First day, and I'm like, God, because everybody's, who's the number one? And something really strange happened to me. And my investigation revealed that there's two secrets. And I was like, holy, this is so interesting. And recording.
And recording.
And flash.
And flash. Good. So you can relax. And you can move this one.
I'm relaxed.
So welcome to our podcast. And we're here to invite our biggest star, Mr. Kostas. He's a former professor from Harvard University. And he is now working in China for a long time. And Kostas is recently writing a book. I am very honored and wrote something with him together.
Yeah.
Professor Kostas, in your early age, you are in Greece. So could you talk a little bit about your life in Greece?
Actually, I was not born in Greece. I was born in America, in Berkeley, California, which is a great place to be at that time, 1962. I was born, and because my father was a graduate student in engineering in Berkeley. And I have two sides to my childhood. One is of course, the American, because I was born and raised until 6 years old. And then I went to Greece. So then I became Greek. So I have like these two different personalities, which gives me a little bit of an accent on English and an accent on Greek. So it's kind of like both ways. But the interesting part is that my father is a very interesting character. He was in Berkeley because he was one of those kind of like very smart students who he was a refugee of the war. Back in Greece, there was a big war, and a lot of people came to Greece from outside during the 1923-24, and his family came. So he grew up as a farmer, and he was supposed to be a farmer, but he didn't want to because he was too smart, and he wanted to learn how to become something more than a farmer. So he actually escaped from home. He ran away basically from home, went to the city, found a foster family, grew up with them, and went to the middle school at that time. And then he graduated from the high school of the city. And he passed into university, number one, very smart. And then he became like basically, he was in agricultural engineering. And then he worked for a few years, and then he got a big fellowship to go to America at that time. We're talking 1959, 60 over there. So he went with my mother. Wow. And they came to Berkeley, where he was a graduate student in hydraulic, actually engineering at the beginning. Then he did a PhD in Davis, California, where I started. My first images is from Davis. I don't remember Berkeley because I was 2 years old, but at 3 years old, I started understanding that I'm in a place, beautiful place, like, it's like a paradise. The sunny every day and grass fields. We were living in the faculty, whatever, like a graduate student housing. So he did his PhD in Davis, California, and then he went to Cornell in Ithaca, New York. So I was following, of course, my mother and me were following him. And after that, when I was 6 years old, because they wanted me to learn Greek and to go to a Greek school, we went back to Greece, where my grandmother lived and his family. He stayed in America, but we went back together. So I started elementary school. So at that time, I was shocked because I had no idea. I never taught Greek. It was always English. So I was always with English, American kids. So I was in a shock because I didn't know anything that was going on. In the elementary school, there was like these kids are like talking Greek. I have no idea what they're talking about. It took me, of course, 2 months, 3 months to learn Greek. I mean, to communicate with kids, because kids, you get really fast. But it was a shock to me because I had no idea what's going on. And that is actually very good, because now that I came to China, I have the same problem. I don't know what they're talking, but I'm familiar with that, because when I was a kid, I had the same problem. People around me talked in a language that I didn't understand, but I was able to figure out what they're saying and also to kind of like communicate with them. So the same is happening now, where I'm in a culture that I don't know, but still I feel very familiar, because there's nothing really any different from when I was at that age. So basically that is the first part of my childhood was basically very American, completely. I went to a kindergarten in America with all the toys and things of the American society of the 1960s. It's a very different society than it is today. Of course, after that, I went to Greece, which was a completely different, even the environment was different, because in America, it was a suburb, there was cars, there was like a lot of open space. And I go to Greece, and everything is very compact, and like there are buildings around you, and there is like cars, and you have to be careful. And there is buses and things that I had no idea what they are. And yet that was fun. I mean, it was always a very good challenge to look into a world of complexity without knowing what's going on, but figuring out. And that's the whole point of your life, is to decode things and to familiarize yourself with the complexity around you. So that was kind of like one of the things that I learned. Also, my father was very, helpful in advising me and showing me how to solve mathematical problems, geometrical problems, because he's very good in engineering, and of course, like the DNA is also useful. So I was very good in mathematics. I love mathematics. It was like my favorite subject, and in all the technical fields. So that was my first. So basically, I did elementary school in Greece, which is mostly about language, how you talk, and culture, the Greek culture, of course. The middle school was a American college, because my mother said that if you go to the American college, which is a very nice and very expensive school, it'll be better for you, which I did. And I had 3 years there, but I didn't like it, because it was too good. Too many kids were spoiled. I was not that. I didn't feel like I belonged to that, even though it was American that I grew up. But it was a disjunction with the society that I lived. The society was very poor. My parents were not that rich, and I felt bad that they had to spend money for me to be in a private school with all these kids which were rich, but not rightfully. They just inherited the money. And I was like, okay, why am I here? I should go to the local school, the the high school of my neighborhood, which I did. So after the third 3 years of middle school, I told my parents that I want to go to a local school, which I did. It was good, because it was like, first of all my friends were local in the neighborhood, so I was like very familiar with the environment. Like I had great friends that were just normal kids from normal families, not the rich kids who had all crazy ideas, and I was very happy. But the problem was that Greece has this gaokao, like this exam thing that's very, very difficult all over Greece. And I realized that if I am in the private school, I won't be doing well. Most of these kids didn't even go to take the exam, because they knew they're going to go to America, because they were ready, because they had the money to do it. I knew I didn't have that money. I had to be studying on my own. So that's one of the reasons why I went to the local school, because that was the normal school that everybody was in. And you learned the normal classes to prepare you for the university exam. So that was good, because that school that I was one of the most famous ones in the same school, high school that my father graduated from. So he was very famous at that time, because he was very smart. And I went to the same school, so I had to prove myself that I'm smart too, which I did. So when the exam came, I took the national exam, and in fact, I came number one in the whole country in the School of Architecture. I had applied for civil engineering because my father thought that's more positive for me. But my mother, because she's an artist, she said, why don't you apply to architecture? Because architecture is half engineering and half art. So I applied to both, but I passed in architecture, number one in the whole country. Well, that was a very big deal. So I thought it was like, oh, I'm God now. I went to the university first day, and I'm like, God, because everybody's, who's the number one? Because in Greece, number one counts. First of all, you pass the exam, you prove that you are smart, and then after that, how good are you in the passing, right? Are you first? Are you second? Are you last? But still, you pass. So I was number one. So I said, like, I'm going to have a lot of girlfriends. I'm going to have a good life, which didn't happen at the end. But I was very hopeful all the time. So architecture was my first degree, which was very useful because I'm very good in art. I mean, engineering too, mathematics, I'm very good, but also I turned out to be very good in drawing and sketching, and I got a lot of friends, and we did a lot of projects together because architecture has these group projects. You work with other students, and so I passed 5 years. It was a 5-year degree. It's called the Diploma of Architectural Engineering in Greece. So after that, you can start building. I mean, you have to give some exams, but then basically you are in a position to go into the real world and build things. I didn't want to finish there. I wanted to continue because my father my whole family was into the PhD degree. So I thought, let me do that first, and then after I finish my PhD, then I can do business or architecture, whatever, or become professor like my father. Because my father actually, after Cornell, he came back to Greece and he was with us. I was like probably in elementary school, middle elementary school. He came back, so we were all family together. In the beginning, he was in Cornell. He stayed there until he got his tenure in the university in the city that we're living, which was in North Greece, called Thessaloniki. That's the city that both parents are from. My mother's basically city. So I decided I want to go to do a master's program. But again, we didn't have much money, and I didn't want to take money from my parents. And I was smart. I said, like, I should be able to get a fellowship, right? I mean, why not? If they can do it, I should do it too. So the last year of university, I was applying to different schools, and I got accepted in many ones. So there was an acceptance from UCLA. There was acceptance from MIT. There was acceptance from North Carolina. Because I applied to very high ones and middle ones and low ones, right? So I have all of them together. But all of them ask for money. So they give you a fellowship, but you have to pay like, 50-50. And I had no idea. I cannot pay. I don't want to pay anything. So I said I should be able to find a way to get in without paying because knowledge is free. I should not be paying for. Anyway, that was my idea at that time, of course. That may have changed. 1986 was the year that I was to go to America. And the summer came and I had no idea what I'm going to do because I had the acceptances, but I didn't respond to them because I said I don't want to go if they don't pay me. And that summer, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, he had an uncle who was a professor in America in Ohio State University, in architecture school, and he told me, since you're smart and since you don't want to go to these other schools, why don't you talk to my uncle? So we made a meeting, and I met with him, and he's a professor. Then he said, like, you're so good. I will take you to our school, and I will give you a fellowship. So he made a phone call on the fly that summer, and he arranged for me to go there and to get a fellowship. Actually, it's called a TA, teaching assistantship, which means that I'm working, but I'm not paying any tuition, which I could do because then I don't have to ask money from my parents. So I took the plane. I remember I didn't have money. My grandmother gave me like the ticket to go there because at that time it was very expensive and going to America was a big deal. And I went there, and I remember my professor, this guy, the uncle of the guy, he went to the airport to pick me up from Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio. I had no idea what's going on. It was like just a university, but I was very ambitious. Like, I'm going to do it there. I'm going to make it good. So we started the class. It was 3 years, basically. 3 years. But the thing is that the first year that I entered the Ohio State University, I was going to do architecture because that's what I knew. And I was applied to the School of Architecture. But this guy, this professor, was not in architecture. He was in architecture school, but he was teaching computer-aided design, which at that time I had no idea what computer-aided design means. I didn't even know what a computer was. We didn't have computers at that time because everything was manual. So first week of classes, there's demonstration of what classes they have. Architectural classes, some design classes, and then there was this class called CAD, Computer-Aided Design, Computer-Aided Architectural Design, CAAD. And I was like, holy, this is so interesting. So I'm going to take this class, which I did. And of course, there was programming, and I had no idea what a computer was. I don't even know how to type, but I learned everything. How do you put it in the form of geometry? Because you have to. This was very primitive CAD. So I had to learn all the stuff that is related to what we call analytical geometry, because basically numbers and how numbers are representing space, like objects in space. Either that is two-dimensional or three-dimensional. Like how do you make a cube? Right? You have these points in space, but these are like projected to the surface, and then you have to move the points. As you move the points, it appears that it's a cube moving, but it's not. It's an illusion, right? And I love that stuff. And also, like, how do you represent data and data that connect with objects in the architectural world? Like, this is a wall, and the wall has this sort of structure, and this is made of this material, and they represent this kind of, information about that. So these things were so interesting. So basically, I changed my degree. And I got a master's in computer-aided architectural design. So I had to take all the computer classes. I had to compete with computer science students who already had a degree in computer science. I was a master's, but I had no idea. My background was in architecture. So I had to learn everything they learned in order for me to survive into the computer science classes that I was supposed to take. Anyway, I finished, and it was a good degree. It was the best thing I did, and I feel very thankful to this professor who actually gave me the opportunity. I did a thesis that was very innovative for that time. It was what we call morphing today. But morphing is a process where you take the geometry of an object and the topology, like in other words, what its location in space, and then the way they're connected. Okay, so let's say a cube has 6 sides, and they're connected in a certain way. The points and the lines are connected in a certain way, and that's called the topology of it. So if you take the topology and you modify it, the moving of the lines start changing. So the cube starts to change shapes, right? At some point, some of the shapes that it can have could collapse into, let's say, a surface, right? If you take the top and the bottom and you start changing the topology, it becomes smaller, smaller, smaller. At some point, they collapse. So now it's a plane. And if you collapse again, it becomes a point, right? But that means that if I take one point and I move it up, I make it into a pyramid now, which means that I can take any shape and change it into any shape I want, right? So I could take a cube and make it into a pyramid. Right? I could take, let's say, a square and make it into a triangle by taking one point and collapsing it. So that was a very interesting idea, because now I can take architectural shapes and move them around in space and change as they're moving around, they become like from one object to another object. So I thought this is almost like an orchestra, like I'm a conductor of an orchestra, where I say, okay, you column, go to that column, and you just merge together, and you connect together, and you do this. So the whole thing was about this, what I called transformational design. And that was actually a very, very interesting thesis. It was a precursor of what we call later morphing. Morphing was a word that at that time didn't exist. Morphing was a 1990s word that was developed as a word. And it was more based on pixels. You morph pixels. It's the same technique. You average the distance between pixels to make something like one face into another face. I did the same thing with objects. So you take one object and you average the spaces to get the in-between, what we call the hybrid between the two shapes. So that was the master's thesis in Ohio State University. After that, I had to go back to Greece to do my army, because I was a Greek citizen. I was born as an American, which is good, and as born in American soil, I was automatically an American citizen. That's how the law is in America.
Right.
We don't care what your parents are, as long as you're born in American soil, because everybody's an immigrant, right, in America. So the birth is what makes you an American. So that was okay. I was born there. But at the same time, the Greek law was the opposite. We don't care where you're born, as long as your parents are Greek. Because there are many Greeks all over the world, and if they say, like in Greece, then it'll be only the people who are in this little country. But Greeks are all over the world, especially in America. So if your parents are Greek, then you're Greek. The Greek law and the American law, they agree with one another. So they say, like, there's these special people are dual citizens by definition, because they're born in America and the parents are Greek. So I was legally both American, and which was very good, because when I'm back to America, I didn't have to have a visa. I was an American citizen, right? And in Greece, I was a Greek citizen. But the price that I paid is that if I'm a Greek citizen, I have to go to the army. If you're not citizen, it's not that simple. You have to go to the army. America didn't have an army that time. It was a draft. It was a voluntary. Yeah, it was but you don't have to go. I mean, I actually
it's not mandatory.
That was not a mandatory. Yeah. But in Greece, it was mandatory. You have to go, which I did, and I went to the Greek army for 1 year. That was fantastic. It was a very good time that I had, because it was after Ohio State, which was very difficult for me. At that time, I was suffering a lot. I mean, I had a good time academically, but I had to work as a research assistant. I had to live in the dormitories. I had to eat the food in the dormitories. I was not having a good life. So when I went to the army, everything was perfect. Like, I had my friends, I had food, and I had guns. What else do you need? I was like happy. I got everything. No, I was just having a good time, but it was also my obligation to Greece. I had to give my time to the Greek army, which I did, and I had a good time. Anyway, so that was basically 1989 to 1990. So then I applied for a PhD. But now I applied a PhD from the point of view of a computer scientist, because I had a degree in computer science. So Michigan, I got accepted again. Many schools, like Harvard accepted me, MIT accepted me, UCLA accepted me, Berkeley accepted me. But I don't want to pay. I still had this attitude.
You're the top.
Because at this point, I was actually a research assistant. You could just have me do some work, so I can do something. So University of Michigan accepted me with a fellowship and everything. So I didn't have to pay anything. And I was like, also, I knew exactly what I'm going to do because I had the computer science, the transformational design. So I went to Michigan. And I did 4 years, my PhD, which is very unusual. Usually it's 5 years is the average. Mine 4 years, because I was very fast. I got the degrees, I got the classes, 2 years of classes. I did my qualifying exams. And then I was working in the Advanced Technology Lab in Michigan, which was basically car design. Because Michigan is close to the Detroit, and Detroit has all these cars. So car design was a big thing. At that time, there was something called reverse engineering.
Reverse engineering, yeah.
But it's a different reverse engineering. That was a real. So what they did is they had a car. In order to design a car in let's say Ford or General Motors, they would make a car out of clay. They would make a big car out of clay, so out of material, right? So,
like a model.
Yeah, like a real model. Like so, they would actually carve it. They make a perfect car. Then they would have to scan the car, make what we call a cloud points of clouds, cloud points. little points that they're scanned the whole thing with a digital camera.
Yeah, in the computer, right?
In a computer, right.
It's called the vector or something
Yeah,
like that.
vector, whatever.
Vector.
Well, no. That's the problem. It's points. So we had to vectorize it. We had to find how these points connect with a surface that passes from them. It's called surface fitting. Okay, so we had to do this, and then you had to cluster and cut it at certain points, because that's where the glass is, and this is where the bumper is, and this is where the lights are. So we had to do this job, and then after that, they took this mathematical models and give it to the machines, and the machine would actually make perfect models. So then we actually did pieces, and then they assembled it together to make the car. That was the thing. So my area,
like a software, right?
Yeah. So my area was computer vision.
Computer vision. Wow.
In fact, it was called machine vision. So machine vision is basically you try to make sense out of points, out of pixels, let's say. Okay, so you have a pixel image, so you have to find, okay, what's your face? Oh, you can find that there is a background and a foreground, right? So something is changing from black to a color. So that is an edge. And you can find the edge of you, right? And then you can find your eyes, because they're high contrast. And then you can find the nose, and then you can find the measurements, and all this kind of information allows you to find the characteristics of your face. Yeah. And of course, to find out what your face looks like, to recognize it, or actually to do things on the face, like you can modify the face, or you can morph the face, do whatever you want.
Different features.
Yeah. So I was perfect for doing also the extraction of information from the point cloud and to get the mathematical surfaces. So that actually was the job that I was doing in the university. And my advisor was also he had a company in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, and I worked for that company. It was called Imageware. And we did this thing, surface fitting, basically. That was it. I was very highly paid. So I was basically making a lot of money as a PhD student. Of course, I had finished already my PhD. My PhD was basically, I was trying to find information images. So at that time, early 1990, scanners came out. Scanners that would scan pixels, right, from an image. So you can scan
two-dimensional scanning.
Of course, pictures, photos, but I was interested in drawings, diagrams, architectural drawings. So you scan a big image of a architectural plan or elevation, and you have these lines, right? So you have to find out from the pixel, where's the line, and where's the corner, and where's the shape, and how you... And you measure everything. So you start recognizing information from an architectural drawing. So my thesis was basically extraction of information from architectural drawings, more or less. That's what it was. More complicated as a title. But it was basically to find architectural information. But because it's a PhD, it had to have some sort of a hypothesis, like it's not, you need to kind of like guess something that you don't know. That's called a PhD. A PhD is basically you're pushing the knowledge further. So you push into something you don't know. And when you don't know something, you guess. Okay, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's going to be this.
Like prediction?
Yeah, it's like, any prediction has inside of it this idea of maybe. I don't know, but I think it may, because this and this happens, maybe this is going to happen, right? So my PhD thesis was that, okay, we can recognize shapes. We know how to do that because that's what computer vision was. But my hypothesis, my guess was, can a computer recognize aesthetic information like proportions and symmetry and hierarchy? That was my hypothesis. Is it possible for a machine, which is not a human, to be able to do the same evaluation, the same assessment as a human could do? Okay, so in this case, it was a kind of like, almost like a precursor of AI. Can AI basically be human? Right. That's really what it was, the thesis, right? So I prove that a computer, even though it doesn't know what aesthetics is, can do the same judgments as a human can do, right? So I gave it like some images from different architects, and the result that it gave me was very similar to a human.
Oh, really?
So in that sense, my proof was that if the machine does the same evaluation, right, than a human does, that's the proof, right? It doesn't mean that I don't care what it feels. The feeling is not a point. The result is what matters. If the result is the same as a human, then we assume that it is human.
But the result is from the software that you made that.
Yeah,
program.
I wrote the software, the whole thing,
right,
of course.
Right.
I wrote the software.
Cutting edge technology.
Yeah,
right
I mean, I was basically scanning, recognizing, recognizing the lines and everything. Then I would extract the symmetry, morphology, all this kind of thing. Then I would ask the computer to give me like an evaluation of this information, okay, in English language, okay, and then I would ask a person, what do you think about this thing? And it will give me some information. And these two match. So if they match.
Like early Turing test.
Yeah, it's a Turing test in a way. That's what it was. Yeah. So then I said, to the best of my knowledge, the machine does understand aesthetics.
Wow.
Because that's my proof. The human does the same thing. So why are we discriminating against it? Right? That was my idea behind it. That was basically the thesis, 1994. And then 1995, I graduated, of course, from PhD, and of course, I applied to many universities. Not many, actually, 3 universities. The first one was UCLA, because I wanted to go to LA, because I wanted to go back to California, where I was born. Yeah. That was my dream. I always wanted to go back. And Michigan was too cold. So I thought, well, I'll go back to LA, which is much better.
West Coast.
Yeah. And also, but UCLA said that we cannot accept you now. We like you, we want you, but we have some problem with the faculty. We will accept you next year. So I said I had 1 year that I can do something. So I applied to 2 other universities. One was in Texas, A&M, down in Texas, and the other was in Cincinnati, which was very close to Michigan. So both accepted me, of course. All of whatever I applied, they accepted me at that point. I had no problem. And they gave me like big salaries and everything, so they had no problem with that. It's just a choice I wanted to make. So I went to Texas. I didn't like it. It was too far away. It was called Texas A&M. It was in the middle of somewhere. It was a nice school, but
countryside.
I felt like too countryside. And then Cincinnati, which was closer to my friends, so I could go back to Michigan and to Columbus, where I was in Ohio State. So I decided I'm going to go to Cincinnati for 1 year, which I did. I stayed for 1 year in Cincinnati, and then UCLA position opened. They cleared out the problem. They had some political problems there, and they invited me to go. So I just packed my stuff and I left, and I went to LA.
So that year is also called a sabbatical year.
That's 1996, and that was like I was in Los Angeles, California.
Wow,
the best place on the earth. I was living. The first place that I lived was in Bel Air.
From Bel Air,
which is in the top of the mountain. Where all these film people live. Michael Jackson.
From Bel Air.
And I lived in a mansion because I was living with 2 other people who we all had a big place in Mulholland Drive, it was called. And there was a swimming pool in my
backyard.
In the backyard, right, exactly. And it was beautiful. The weather was so good. I had my own car, like a very nice car. I would go to UCLA every day. It was very good.
Hollywood places.
Yeah, Hollywood.
Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah. Everything was like completely like iconic. And until I realized that too good is not good. If it's too good, you have a problem. You cannot have too good. You need something bad. You need something opposite. You cannot have the same weather every day. You cannot be the same good every day. You cannot be the same beautiful every day. You have to be a little bit ugly, a little bit rainy, a little bit different. And I didn't realize it at that time. I was too much into the beauty of LA that I just didn't realize it. But it hit me after 5 years. I think in this beautiful and perfect weather, I realized that it's too good, and I cannot do that. I was like depressed at some point because
really,
because I felt like I want to be depressed, but I can't because it's so
you
good.
got everything. You got anything.
Yeah. Let's say that I have a disappointment, like something, like my business doesn't work well, right? I cannot be sad.
Because it's a very small.
Good. Yeah,
small
everybody's
trouble.
happy. How can you be sad? So, but I want to be sad. It's natural to be sad,
It's called,
but I can't.
Yeah. It's called the happiness is a warm gun.
Right. Exactly.
Happiness is a warm gun. You think about that.
Yeah. So all these things was like bothering me, and also the university was very, very political, too political. There's like fightings and fightings. I mean, like intellectual. Like all these professors were like accusing other professors. I was not into the whole thing. Even though they started attacking me at some point, and I was trying to, of course, I didn't care much because my area was more. I was teaching computer-aided design basically to the. It was in the architecture school. But at some point I couldn't take it. It was too much. And then I applied to Harvard, and Harvard accepted me. Of course, they were like, yes, please come. We want people like you. So I said goodbye. But so
I left LA. I don't want to go back. The problem is that if you ask me, how much time did you spend in LA? I'll tell you 1 year. Even though it was 8 years, 9 years, it feels like 1 year because there never was any summer or any winter. It was always the same weather. So you lose time. 8 years passed by, and I just lost my time. I had no idea that it was 8 years because if I go back in memory, I would say I had no recollection of there's no seasons. It's basically oblivion. You just live in a dream. That's not good. That's not normal. See, eventually one day you become old. You don't know what happened to your life. That's not good. I don't like that.
So I remember I went to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Harvard is. I arrived, of course, with the airplane, blah, blah, blah. I went to the hotel, and it was night. I slept, and then the next morning I woke up, and something really strange happened to me. I got out from the hotel, and there was rain.
Rain? You never seen rain before?
I haven't seen rain for like 8-9 years. I was like, so beautiful. I was like, the guy who's dancing in the rain. Cambridge was a nice drizzle. It was like a refreshing rain that was like just like you feel the moisture. It was not this violent rain that you see in LA, and then no rain for the rest of the year. It was this like clouds and and the old houses and the trees were a lot of trees. It's beautiful. The grass was like just fresh, and there was this on the beautiful. So I was like, this is a place to be. Yeah, this is a place. So I just says, of course, they made me an offer, and the offer was that I have to go there as an visiting in the beginning because they couldn't. It took them 1 year to release the position so I can be hired as a normal associate professor. So I was basically a visiting assistant professor, which means that I had to go back and forth to LA because I was still a professor at UCLA. That was only 1 semester this happened. And then they hired me as a regular professor. Now, Harvard is a very, very good school, and it's actually top school in the world. But there's a reason, okay? Because I was inside, I was trying to find why it's such a good school, okay? And what is that it does that other schools don't do? And my investigation revealed that there's 2 secrets. One secret, they're not secrets, they're like basically techniques. The one is that they hire the best professors in the world, but not permanently. They've hired them as adjunct professor.
Well, what is adjunct?
Adjunct means that you are temporary. You're not a permanent. In other words, you are just there to teach or to do research. So let's say somebody is very famous, has an office like an architect. Let's say Frank Gehry. Okay, let's give you like what's could have happened. So he's at top of his world. He's like a famous architect. Everybody knows him. They say, you want to be a professor at Harvard? He says, yes. So they hire him. He becomes a professor. It's good for him because he's a Harvard professor, even though he's an architect. And at the same time, he can find many students, the best students in the world, to hire for his office, right? And the school makes a good name because now we have Frank Gehry is teaching at Harvard, so it sounds very good, right? And every now and then, a new one comes. Let's say now we bring, Libeskin. Now we bring, whoever is the best in the top, they want to come. You want them, they work for you, you work for them. So it works perfectly for everybody, and they don't stay. which is the key point. So you always refresh the pool of high professional and academic people, so you always have the best. That's number one. Number two is they have the best students too. A lot of students are very, of course, rich and they can go there because they pay, but a lot of them are very smart. So you get a percentage which is the average, not the average, but they're like rich kids, basically. They're not necessarily good, okay? But I had to deal with all these kind of kids. Some are very interesting, but they don't want to work. They just know they have easy money, so they do nothing. But they're interesting. They do have good ideas, and they have access to a lot of information. Then there's the very smart ones, which they bring with scholarships. These are the top. So these students increase the level. So now you have a good student body. So now you have the perfect combination of professors and teachers, and that is how this system works. And of course, a lot of branding and a lot of your hat and the T-shirts and blah blah blah, and of course the movies
and the sports.
And sports. The word Ivy League comes from sports. Ivy League was a league of 9 schools in the North East America, where there was like Yale and Princeton and Dartmouth and Cornell and UPenn, Brown, Harvard. I guess these are the schools that were the Ivy League schools. And they all did similar things, but Harvard is the most successful in this kind of, and the word is also Harvard. Sounds very northeastern British. It doesn't matter. It's a good school. So I went there and I was teaching, again, computer-aided design to very smart students. Many of these students were Chinese. I told you earlier, I just said that they were smart. Those were the smart ones.
Really?
They brought these, from all over the world, but Chinese students were very smart. Philip Yuan came there, who is also the Dean of Architecture Urban Planning in Dongji. He came for like a semester, and he was, I was his kind of like advisor in a way. So many people who were Chinese people who went there, they become very successful.
But what kind of thoughts the Chinese students brought to you in Harvard at that time?
They had their own culture, but they were more interested in finding what we have to give to them. So they're very, very disciplined, very open-minded, and very hardworking. So that's where they're good students. Right? They're very smart. So they would actually take a project and they would do the best one. So, for example, I had one guy, very, very smart. I don't like the word genius, but he was very, very smart, Chinese guy, from a very minor university here. He invited me one time to go. I don't even remember where it was, somewhere in the countryside, in Shanghai, somewhere around Shanghai. But it was like a very low-level university. When he came to Harvard, he was like just a little guy who was like trying to find what's going on. So he took my class, computer-aided design algorithms, and he did one of the best projects I've ever seen in my life. Very, very good. Code-wise, like a genius. He would just write the code. He did a system basically that self-replicates. It actually makes its own, creates itself. So you give it like a plan, a building a program, and he would actually make the system where it would actually it would solve the problem, and it would actually make the building, and it would make renderings and everything, the whole process. It was amazing. I still have this, and when you look at him, you just never notice. And there's some other kids which are very rich and very flamboyant, and they talk and talk and talk, and they do nothing. When it comes to do work, they don't. They're just lazy. So there is this discrepancy between the students who are good and hardworking, and then the ones who are very vocal, but they are lazy. Okay, I have to say that. Some of them were lazy. They just don't want to work because it's too hard. And they don't need to work. So my contract was, as associate professor, it was about 8 years. And then after that, I started a company.